Hello and welcome once again to Center Left Radio, the progressive voice of hope, politics, and jazz. My name is Richard Gayzur, and as always, I am pleased and I'm honored to be your host and your commentator for another of our commentary shows, one of the shows that we have up on air, online, 7 days a week here at www.centerlefttalkradio, one word, centerlefttalkradio.com. For those of you who have been listening to this show over the course of the nearly 4 years that we've been doing it now, you know that on occasion I have guests, and I look forward to that. It's one of my favorite things to do. I stop doing my monologues and I get into a dialogue or a multi-log, whatever the case may be. This is one of those situations today, and it's a very, very auspicious time. Maybe I'm using the wrong word there. It's a very important time that we have the conversation we're about to have about, of all things, the swastika. Yeah, I kind of expected that reaction. Let me back up here and give you a long, let's go up to about 50,000 feet to basically give you a setup to where we're going today. And by the way, I should begin by saying that my guests today are Mr. Nikunj Trivedi, who is the president of the Coalition of Hindus of North America, and Dr. Toshikazu Kenjitsu Nakagaki, the founder and president of the Heiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of New York. If those names sound like they're going, if you combine the thoughts that you're getting about those organizations with the idea of a swastika and understanding that there's some pretty heavy stuff we're about to talk about here, you're going in the right direction. But back to that 50,000 foot level that I was referring to. A little over 40 years ago, as I was going to meet my wife's parents for the first time. My wife is a Northern Indian, Punjabi, born in the Punjab, and so in the interest of full disclosure, the first thing I was aware of when I walked into the house was this amazing odor of Punjabi cooking. If you've never had this experience, and I would imagine many people have not, your nostrils and your brain deserve to be hit by the combination of badi ilaichi and choti ilaichi and haldi and everything else, zira, just hitting you as hard as it can as you walk in. The words may not mean a lot the way I'm saying, but it even has to be said in Hindi just to get the full impact of the smell. Once I'd gotten past that sensory overload, there was another one right on its heels. And on the far wall of my future parents-in-law's living room was a framed picture about 18 inches square. And inside that frame was a swastika. Yeah, that swastika. Well, maybe a little different, I don't know. This swastika was not sitting at the 45-degree angle that you frequently saw the Nazi version of the swastika being shown at. This thing was sitting with perfect horizontal and vertical planes, so it was resting on its edges. And within each of the four regions defined by the lines, this is hard to do well in radio, but if you can imagine this, there was a dot, what ultimately is known as a tika, in each one of the four regions. I knew it was different, but it was unmistakably a swastika. And it's sitting in the living room in a place of honor in the house of the people whose daughter I intend to marry. Well, we had a long conversation after that, and I understood that what I was looking at was a multi-thousand-year-old religious symbol. Now, being a white guy from New York City, and being in a European culture, I never had any sense of that. I would venture to say that very, very few people today in America, 99+% of people who have not been exposed to Southern Asian or Eastern Asian cultures would have anything less than the reaction I had at that time, and may not ever have had the benefit of the explanation for why it was there. Okay, coming back down to earth and fast forwarding 40 years, we have a bill that has now shown up in the New York State Senate. It's sitting, it's not been passed, but I feel I should read something of what it says. And in most bills in the New York State Senate, they begin with something called a legislative finding. So the legislative finding, section 1 of this bill, says the following. The legislature hereby finds the recent spike in hate crimes across our state and nation as a whole to be highly disturbing and a societal epidemic in need of remedy. As many of our youth are not aware of the hateful connotations behind swastikas and nooses, it is necessary for the legislature to mandate compulsory education in all schools across our great state in regard to the meaning of these two symbols of hate. Requiring students to be educated in the significance of these displays of bigotry will go a long way toward fostering a more inclusive and tolerant society for all. This is New York State Senate Bill number 6648. Now, just based on what we've said so far, if you are a Hindu or Buddhist parent living in New York State and you have your kids in New York State schools, if this were to become law, then by force of law, your children who have been raised with a symbol that you have in your house, that is one that, and depending on the specific interpretation within the specific culture, it's about auspiciousness, harmony, peace. I think Nikunj is going to give us a little more background about that. But you are going to be taught, if this were to pass as it is, that, oh, I'm sorry, your parents had it wrong. Several thousand years of culture and history are completely mistaken. You are basically being fed something that is hateful, a symbol of fear and hate, and your parents got it wrong. Talk about cancel culture. This would be the ultimate statement of cancel culture. So since the bill is talking about education, and I naively throw this out, and I'm getting to Nikunj in a second over here. Since we're talking about education, the logical thing would seem to be, well, we add this extra piece of education, which is, oh, by the way, besides being totally misappropriated and misused by the Nazis, it really has something else, several thousand years of history. Well, and if we add that in, everybody will be happy, right? If that were the case, I imagine we wouldn't be having this show right now. There wouldn't be an issue to talk about. So clearly that hasn't won the day or won the hearts and minds of the people who feel committed to putting this out there. Now that's the roll up to all this. This is the opening kickoff, and I toss it back to Nikunj Trivedi. And before you tell us about the swastika and where this is all going and where you see it, please tell us something about the organization you represent, the Coalition of Hindus of North America.
Yeah, Richard, thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here, and wonderfully put the way your story was, and I can totally relate to that because I've had that experience with my friends as well, when they come over to my house and they see the swastika being displayed like prominently in our house, and they're shocked, including my Jewish friend, right? One of my Jewish friends who came over and like, what is?
Yeah.
So anyways, so I can fully empathize with you. So a little bit about CoHNA, Coalition of Hindus in North America. We're a grassroots advocacy organization that was started last year. With the idea is to educate our fellow Americans and North Americans, so Canada and the US, about what Hinduism is and what the values of the culture are. And the people that you see around you, we're not some bizarre people, and we are truly American citizens and Canadian citizens that want to make the world a better place. So it's important for us to understand what Hinduism really is about. So that's what we focus on, and certain some of the issues that Hindus face in the society, whether it's so things like confusion, this whole thing about swastika, educating people about what our famous symbols are, our culture is, but also sometimes there's representing the voices in various spheres, whether it's in media, politics, education, different places. So we started this coalition last year to kind of focus on a grassroots advocacy effort for many of the issues that our community encounter. So that's a little bit about us.
Okay.
You can check out the website CoHNA, CoHNA.org for more information.
Okay. But
Now let's talk about swastika.
why hasn't the logic of, well, let's just do some more education? Why hasn't that won the day?
Exactly. So let me unpack a few things, right? First, let's talk about swastika quickly. I'll give you a very high level overview. And swastika, actually, the word itself, swastika, it's a Sanskrit word, right? It means that which brings good luck and well-being. The actual word means that which brings good luck and well-being, right? It occurs frequently in many of the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain texts and scriptures, literature, music, you talk about symbolism, temples, all over the place, right? It symbolizes so many different things, whether it's the goals of life, like the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, the four main goals of life in the Hindu tradition, the four Vedas, the most sacred texts in the Hindu tradition, so many different things, the alignment of the cosmos, the cycle of birth and death. There's so many different aspects that the swastika actually symbolizes. As you said, it's thousands of years old. There's recorded evidence of swastika being at least 13,000 years old.
Wow.
In India, as well as in the Ukraine and stuff like that. So this symbol has been around for thousands of years as a symbol of peace, well-being, and prosperity. Yeah. And naturally, Dr. Nakagaki will talk about the Buddhist side of it. But again, between the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions, the word swastika, I consider the word swastika as pretty much unique to these three traditions, right? Because the word itself is not used anywhere else. Now, symbols have different meanings to different people, right? No doubt about it. But what's really important to keep in mind is, I'll give you an example. Let's say I draw a plus sign on a wall, right? To a mathematician, that plus sign may look like a plus sign, right? They'll say, okay, well, that's a plus sign.
Okay.
To a Christian, that may look like a cross, right? And to a child, it may look like a crisscross sign that you're playing on the street with, right? So it could be, so symbols have very specific meanings and things behind it. So how you refer to them is really, really important. So for me, the whole idea of education is not just simply putting in a bill. You have to really differentiate symbols of hatred versus symbols of peace, well-being, and prosperity, right? So when you talk about swastika, that specific word only means peace, well-being, and prosperity. And then there's a history behind it, which Dr. Nakagaki has written a book on it. And I myself, by the way, Richard, just like you, about last year, before this bill came in picture, as a Hindu, I myself thought that Hitler misappropriated the swastika. But after doing months and months of research, I realized that Hitler never did, because in the Mein Kampf, he never ever talks about the swastika. He only talks about something called the Hakenkreuz, which is the hooked cross. Okay?
Right.
And this Hakenkreuz, the hooked cross, has a very long history where it was used to persecute Jews and other minorities in Europe and stuff like that. It's a long history, right? So unfortunately, a sacred symbol of the Christian cross was usurped by the Nazis and by the Hitler to turn it into a symbol of genocide, death, and destruction.
The Hakenkreuz that basically is what we think of when we think of the Nazi symbol. So
yes.
That really, now, is that more of a technicality? Because just to the untrained eye, it looks like kind of the same thing,
Absolutely, and that's really important, because like I said, the example, like, so someone, if I had put a cross, so that's, if a cross is used by the KKK, right? It's not a holy cross, right? It's a, you know what it is, so I'm not going to say that, right? But if you're going to use, if you see the same cross, the same similar looking symbol in a church, you're not going to say, hey, remove that symbol because it's a symbol of hatred, right?
Exactly.
So I look at it that way, saying, okay, you can see a symbol on a wall, on a grave that has been used as a symbol of hatred. So let's call it exactly what it is, which is the Hakenkreuz, the hooked cross, and don't call it the swastika. Now, I understand that people are used to calling it the swastika because of historic reasons, but that's something that we have to put in terms of education, that when you start talking about the right education, you have to say, what is the symbol of hatred versus what is the symbol of, that's not of hatred? Because, like I said, the word itself has been mistranslated by various historic reasons. And again, Dr. Nakagaki can talk about that. But the idea here is that the education bill should focus on the right type of education so that people who use the symbol for peace, well-being, and prosperity are not subject to bullying, harassment, and the cancel culture that you just talked about of a billions of years, of thousands of years old, and the symbol used by 2 billion people, nearly 2 billion people, like a 1/3 or little bit less than a third of the entire world population uses this symbol today as a symbol of peace, well-being, and prosperity, right? So that's really important.
Okay, and I appreciate that so much. I appreciate the distinction between my ignorance, and I've heard of the Hakenkreuz, I've heard of that, and I never quite well, I never imagined the need to recognize that and differentiate that between the swastika. As I'm speaking to you right now in my studio, I am looking at a swastika right now that my wife put up here, and that to me is hopefully I'll keep having good shows. That's the idea. And it's that common and natural to me. I couldn't possibly imagine that being the identical thing to the Nazi symbol. But Dr. Nakagaki, I'd like to throw this to you. And I want to go back into the nature, the existence of what is happening with the Senate bill there right now. Would you agree with Nikunj that education differentiating the swastika as we know it, and I'm going to say I'm part of this culture, from the Hakenkreuz, would that be is that the way we should be approaching the problems associated with this bill? Are the people who are promoting this bill willing to accept, or do you get any indication that going in that direction, differentiating this into two symbols, is the way to solve the issue? And by the way, before you did that, just as I asked Nikunj, would you please tell us something about the Heiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of New York? I'd appreciate that.
Thank you. First of all, myself is a Buddhist priest. So actually, I used to be a president, still the executive director, the officer of the Buddhist Council of New York. So myself is a Buddhist, and then so that's why this swastika is a Buddhist symbol for a long time. At least in Japan we call it manji. Like there's a movie called Jumanji, but then the manji is a translation. Manji means the thousands of benefits. So it's like auspiciousness. Right. So when we say manji, which is a translation from the swastika into the Japanese, or Chinese, we call it one and then man. And so those are some terms that we use when they translate. But then the original one is a Sanskrit term, swastika. And so it comes up in very various Buddhist texts as well. And the Heiwa Foundation itself that I'm doing it's basically the bringing a peace and then the dialogue especially, because many part of the pieces tend to be kind of reactive type of things, but then our organization try to bring the more instead of reactive something, but then the proactive type of way of bringing the peace. So I do a lot of study for the interfaith. I've been my doctor thesis was this swastika. Actually, the Buddhist swastika and the Hitler's cross, rescuing a symbol of peace from forces of hate. So that's the kind of a mission, which was 10 years ago, actually. But this book actually finished like 10 years ago, but it took me for 8 years to even, publish because of the difficulties and, of the idea of the swastika itself. In here, swastika has to be evil somehow. And then plus, if it's not evil, they feel uncomfortable. I don't know why, but then it's the reality. That's the first of all. Of course, I know why. Sorry,
it's how we were raised. Myself, as a child post World War II, that's what we were fed. That was there.
And the one thing that we didn't know also is before that there is a swastika all over in this country too. Not just the Hitler used it, but here, like 1900, the beginning of 1900, there is the swastika represent 4 L's, like a luck, love, light, life, luck, like a 4 L, right?
It was the L's at different angles that would look more or less like a swastika.
Yeah, it's more like closer to the idea of the swastika too. That's why the swastika became a popular word at that time. Already. That's why the translator used that particular symbol, translated as a swastika, because it was a little more popular language that people know. But that was a good luck symbol. So even like a town in New York State, there is a town called Swastika.
Really?
And there has a memory of the good memory of swastika is it's not just took over, but then they kind of damaged the symbol that they really appreciated before. And even like there's a Buddhist temples. I mean, actually, Buddhist Churches of America is one of the longest, oldest, organization, Buddhist organization, Japanese Buddhist organization. And then when they have all the what do you call it, the occasion, like I'm talking about 1920s or 1930s and so forth.
Yeah.
At that time, they always use the swastika all over the place. And then so swastika is a Buddhist symbols, and then the marching all over the place. And then, but at that time, it was a good symbol. It's only just recently after the war. I mean, that swastika became, during the wartime, of course, the Nazis started using it, so they stopped using it. But yet, that particular symbol has been the swastika, known as a swastika at that time too already.
I'm gonna jump in with a thought here. If I am one of the senators, or I don't know how many people were behind the introduction of Senate Bill 6648. I don't know how many people.
It's now 2727. S2727.
S2727 now.
Something
Okay,
like that.
good to just have the update on this. One would think that before doing something like this and putting this out, a little research would have been in order. I would be embarrassed to death if my name were on that bill right now, learning or hearing just a fraction of what you gentlemen have given us today, have given our audience here. This obviously would make it virtually impossible to allow this bill. No Hindu or Buddhist in their right mind would allow their children to be told what would ultimately be just blatant lies, blatant mistruths about the swastika. If a little research had gone into this before bringing this as a bill?
Because it's a bill, the taboo, right? The swastika is known as a taboo thing, so nobody cannot discuss even much. So that's why people who say swastika assume, this is a taboo, we can't touch, it has to be evil, everything. So that kind of a mentality is already existed. That's why it becomes the, normally when we study or when we do some research, you wanted to start with what you're talking about, like a definition.
What am I talking about?
First of all, what is the swastika? So you look up a dictionary and then see what's the origin of it, and you clearly know that's a Sanskrit terms, start from a su as the basic terms of the good. Actually, the word's good, and then the to be asti, to be good. So the stage, and then the ka create the noun. So which means this is a terms that use for good. Okay, not to violence or anything. So first you can define, but then what about then the swastika? Is Hitler ever used a swastika, the word? No. He, as Nikunj said, I did a study for this too because of the doctoral dissertation. So I have to study, and then I went to of course Germany and so forth to research for this too. But then the Hakenkreuz is the one that the Hitler use always the speech and books, that when they when he used the words, refer to their symbol called Hakenkreuz, never be swastika. Swastika is only translation of the Hakenkreuz. So that's why German people think, American people translate swastika, Hakenkreuz as swastika. That's why they explain it for American people understand.
Until this conversation, I was among that group. Forgive me. I've been rather casual in my interpretation and my understanding of this. But I'm going to go a step further now. Given again, this information is, I hope anyone within your organizations who is hearing this show and learning about this, but not just that, regular listeners of Center Left Radio and people who may have no background in this whatsoever. This is amazingly important stuff. But it makes it all the more, given this knowledge, and I'm sure that you've shared this with the people in the New York State Senate who are behind this. I'm sure they are no strangers to what you're talking about here on the show. If they've resisted doing anything, if this bill is still alive in roughly the same form that it was that I was just quoting to you, and I'm assuming, Nikunj, is it more or less in the same form?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that briefly.
Okay. But if they haven't reacted to the information that you're giving me, then these people are being guided by something a hell of a lot stronger than intellectual honesty. There's an emotion, I can only imagine, there must be a deep, deep emotional component to how this bill is being presented and how it's being empowered right now. Could either of you guys talk to that, please? Where are
Absolutely. So let me give you a little bit of background. So since last year, we've been working with different senators and assemblymen and stuff like that to educate them about this whole thing, right? Why there's a problem here, what needs to be done. So there has been progress made, right? The bill, we're trying to figure out, okay, there are certain, like let's say 20 senators or something who have co-sponsored the bill. So we've had calls with many of them. And some of the key ones, like Senator Kaminsky, Senator Shelley Mayer, who's the head of the Education Committee, right? She has been she has been very receptive to this whole thing and saying we understand the concerns. Even Senator Kaminsky himself understood what we're talking about. Unfortunately, what happens is that, like you said, like my daughter, she's in like now she's in 4th grade. She has been learning since 4th grade that the swastika is a symbol of hatred, right?
I can imagine.
So what happens is everybody has to unlearn it in a certain way because that's what is happening. So right now, the challenge was with the bill. The reason the bill came about was they found in Long Island and other places, they found like the noose and then the Hitler symbol being written on a locker and all these things. So the idea was to educate people about that, hey, these are symbols of hatred, right? So that's a noble goal, and we fully support the idea of education around hatred because it's important for the world to become a better place, no doubt. But how to go about doing it is really important. So that's what we're trying to impress upon the senators and stuff, that let's make sure that we work together. We want to support the bill in a form that accommodates everybody, that differentiates symbols of hatred with symbols of versus symbols of peace, right? So they understood that part. Now, like you said, like the conversation we're having today, until that conversation, they were not themselves aware. So the people who are truly understanding, some people have an agenda or some people are closed-minded. So we can't change their minds, unfortunately, right? Someday they may change. But the people who are open to understanding and different perspectives and then adjusting their perspective based on what they learn, right? Those people are the ones who are working with us. And those are the people who will be more powerful of a voice, like yourselves and others, but even within the Senate and the Assembly, that there are people who understand that the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Jain communities use this. They have come to our temples. They have, had food in Indian homes and stuff like that, and they've seen the symbol out there. So some people understand that part. But then I can tell you, last week we had a call with one of the senators, and in the middle of the call, you know what he said? I truly apologize that I actually co-signed this bill without the proper understanding.
That's what I've been imagining with this whole thing. Yeah, I mean, this happened. This was an emotional knee jerk, is what I'm hearing over here. Yeah. But okay, so the bill is there. Mm-hmm. What is your ask to the senators? What are you specifically asking them to do relative to the bill as it exists now? What do you want to actually see happen?
Absolutely. So what we're doing is we have been working with them to change the language of the bill, right? To incorporate the information that says, look, swastika is different than Hakenkreuz or the hooked cross. So let's put both the words in the bill. Let's talk about what the difference is between the two, right? Show and educate people, create modules and create programs that educate people that, hey, when you see this symbol, let's say a symbol somewhere, right? Know the difference. If you see that being graffitied as a hate symbol on Jewish synagogues or on graves or any place of hate, right? In a context, call that what it is, the hooked cross, the Hakenkreuz. But if you see this type of similar looking symbol in a temple, or if you walk into a Hindu Buddhist family home or something like that, understand that that's not the same symbol. That is called the swastika, right? And that is the symbol of peace, well-being, and prosperity. That's all we're asking for, that let's make sure that when you teach education, right, from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade, you're not teaching people to hate others for something that they don't understand. Yeah. What we want is understand the differences, because we live in a multicultural world. I mean, think about Queens, right? 150 languages roughly are spoken in Queens, right? Just one of the most diverse places in the world. Now, are you going to go into New York State? And New York State is also one of the most diverse states in the world in general. Are you going to go into New York City schools and New York State schools where you have all these different populations and say, hey, by the way, I don't really care about your symbol. I don't really care about you. I only care about what I think. And that's not how the world works, unfortunately.
Dr. Nakagaki,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a good transpose there. Dr. Nakagaki, do you feel that the way, what Nikunj is describing is the way we can ultimately find this legislation going? Does it feel like it's going in the right direction? Obviously, it cannot pass in its current form, and no one's added in, Nikunj, correct me, no one's added in any of the language that you're talking about just yet.
Not yet.
Are we
Not yet.
going in the right direction? And if we're not there yet, what's your ask to our listeners? What can people listening to Center Left Radio do about this?
First of all, this bill itself, with the change in the word itself is a very important one, I believe. And then the intention itself, because we agree, because they try to be peaceful and then try to respect, because the swastika itself meaning, that way, that's nonviolence is a swastika, the symbol. So itself actually. So first of all, feel like this is, instead of one side. I mean, there are two ways. One is actually totally reject this bill itself, because
does that seem possible or likely?
Well, I don't know. That's why there are two ways, as I said. So if we accept these bills as an intention, then they're making a mistake of the basically of definition of the language. So make clear which one is which, because most of the other country, actually, like Japan, for instance, we do have two words. Even use like a Nikunji make distinction. We call it manji in the Japanese Buddhist temples, and then if you see the Nazi Germany, that's the only specific one, Germany only, with the red color and then the particular symbol. So it's associated with the Hakenkreuz, or Japanese translation is Kagijuji. So Kagijuji is kind of so that's another translation that we use. So if we have a language, two different language clearly differentiate those two things. So this is a basic part. I mean, what I'm feeling like, this is a lot of actually a lot of history behind for both this symbol. So we need to have more education actually, but at least this is a very important step, because first we wanted to start with the definition of the language what we're talking about. And so have to be understanding is clear. And then why people never ask about why the swastika or Hakenkreuz is the what do you call it, the anti-Semitism symbol. Because swastika, historically, I'm talking about good swastika, never be associated with the Jewish or any, the bad or any anti-Semitism feeling. But yet, hooked cross has been the history of anti-Semitism. That if you know those things, then you know why people use the swastika or Hakenkreuz as an anti-Semitism. So there's a clear distinction of the cross versus the swastika in Asia. Those things has to be done. So that's why this bill would be nice to be used for more educational way to make sure that those two are totally different things.
So that what otherwise might have been a problem, the bill in its original form, if I'm hearing you correctly, if it's properly worded and properly restructured, it's actually something you would support, more than telling it to go away, if this were a vehicle for really solid education. But again, and I was suggesting, that I said, what's the ask that you would want to have? What would you ask of people within your own organizations and anyone else listening to this podcast right now? Is there something they can do? I'm gonna change that question. If there's something you want them to do, what would it be? Because it almost sounds as though, or am I getting the message here, that you're moving in the right direction here. There's a lot of embarrassment for a number of people in the New York State legislature that this went to the level it's gone. Should the public be jumping in and moving this thing with you? Is it best left in the hands of the experts? What is the ask, if there is one?
That's what we say. We want the people of New York, people of the state of New York, to support us on this. We are fully aware of the intentions of the bill. We are supporting that. What we want is for people to say, hey, let's make sure there's a distinction between symbols of hatred and symbols of peace in the bill. So our students, our kids, the millions of kids who are not just Hindu, but even non-Hindus, non-Buddhists, right? The regular folks who are understanding, who need to change their understanding as they grow up and become better citizens in the world. Let's make sure they understand that in this world, there are people who hate each other, but there are people in the world who actually love each other. And the world is actually a good place in general.
Yeah.
It's not a hateful place. We need to make the world a better place. And that's why we need to educate people that there are symbols that mean well-being, peace, and prosperity. There are symbols that are used to peddle hatred. Let's make sure we want to create opportunities for peace, promoting peace, well-being, prosperity in the world, making it a better place. And only way to do that is to create a bill that balances all of these different factors.
Okay, so if I wanted to respond to what both of you gentlemen have just said,
yes,
what should I say? How should I express it? To whom?
Yes, so we can go to our website, CoHNA.org/swastika, and you'll see the entire information that you need.
Spell out that first part of the website again.
CoHNA.org.
Okay.
Yeah, and /swastika, SWASTIKA. So the campaign, you can actually click on it and you can send an email to your senator or basically senator for now with your zip code and say, hey, I want you to support this bill.
Excellent.
The way we are talking about.
Doctor, do you have a similar situation yourself?
Yeah, basically we are working together, basically. So I fully support that part. And also if any organization or individual maybe wanted to have like a town hall meeting, or organization can have a little seminar about this particular bills or about the swastika, the things, that would be actually wonderful too, because this is a symbol, this is very interestingly elusive symbol too, in a way, in the West, especially because when we have even interface, I'm a Buddhist, I say, right? There's a lot of interface gathering, but one of the symbol we never be able to hear in the West is the swastika in a central part of the, the religious symbol. Even though that never disappear, but then the people don't recognize swastika anywhere in a symbol itself. So that's also very, very strange in one way. But then still, as we said, 1/3 of the populations are using it, and especially global community that we're talking about. Then the people go travel to Japan or the China or other places, they will see whether they like it or not. But has been then sometimes people say, they complain it, oh, why do they use this kind of symbol? But then why do you
Don't
say
they know?
Haven't
they found out?
It's the opposite way. So that's why when we talk about globalization too, right? So why not to teach or to try to bring make this opportunity to really discuss about this particular symbol. And that's what I feel like wanted to see. One thing that I'm afraid is if this bill is down, then we don't talk anymore. I mean, that's not the way.
Yes, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Let me add this, okay? And the reason that you and I are talking the reason the three of us are having a conversation is because we have a common friend. In my case, a dear friend of over 40 years. Paul Newman, who is the abbot of, he is the, let's see, he's the head of, I guess it's the Tendai Buddhist Institute in Canaan, New York. And Paul basically has been, he's been with that, I guess he's founded that in 1995. He and I go back 40 years. I've watched Paul has evolved into this remarkable human, and the fact that we're sitting here and talking amongst ourselves today, I think is a tribute to how much influence and how much we all love him, and how much influence he's had on all of us. I'll go a step further than that. If these microphones could be helpful in terms of having the town halls that you were referring to, Doctor, I am more than happy to act in perhaps in a moderating form or any other way you would want to facilitate the creation of podcasts like the one that's being made of this show for distribution, and hopefully the beginning of an audio education process that'll be shared by a lot of people and bring a lot of changed minds, I hope. But and that, as well as, once again, Nikunj, could you please just repeat where people go to join the cause?
Yeah, absolutely. CoHNA.org/swastika, SWASTIKA.
That is great. That there is a place for people to go, that there is a need for education, and that rather than walking away from this situation, you guys are diving in head first, feet first, everything else. And from what I'm hearing today, that's exactly what's required. My guests today have been Dr. Toshikazu Nakagaki, got it right this time, I'm sorry, and Mr. Nikunj Trivedi. Dr. Nakagaki is the founder and president of the Heiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of New York, and Nikunj Trivedi is the president of the Coalition of Hindus of North America. We've been talking about something that I would say the best way to wrap this is to say that's not spoken about enough, and it's high time we did. And this, I think, and I hope, is the beginning of a much larger series of discussions that will go beyond just redefining one symbol of hate. It'll show what can happen when people are open to listening and learning. And I think that's at the heart of all of this. In fact, I would go a step further. This is the heart of everything we're talking about, is a suppression of fear and an elevation of hope and love. Fear is at the fundament of everything we're talking about with the misuse of this beautiful symbol, and it's this perpetuation of fear that we're seeing too much of as we go through the Trumpian hangover that we're in right now at this point in this country. And it's a question of within our souls, individual souls, finding a way to recognize the things that we fear, willfully suppressing that fear, and elevating our hope and love. This is what I write about in my books. And it's what exactly I'm putting it in different words. I hope I'm not co-opting someone's thoughts or misreading something you're saying, but I think we're all coming from the exact same place. We have to suppress our fears. And once you do that, the opportunity for love and hope and hopefulness is what invariably happens. And that's where we're going to continue going. I thank you, gentlemen, once again for being part of today's show. And this hopefully will be the first of many such efforts to continuing the effort towards understanding and bringing more peace to the world.
Thank you very much, Richard. And namaste to all.
Namaste, guys. Have a wonderful day.
All right.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Okay.